This is another long garden update. I went through pretty much all my plants in this update. It's April 4th, 2021. Let's start the update with the grape. Remember I broke one of the stems last week? The inside is looking a lot browner. The buds at the end of the stem is still growing. I think it's getting a bit bigger than last week. While the other buds on the other stems are also growing. And here we have the asparagus. Beside this stem, the purple variety and this tiny one over here, I'm not seeing any other stems from the asparagus. And here we have the saffron. You can see the leaves have started to turn yellow. And the rhubarb is looking very healthy. Lots of leaves. And also at the center of each of the growth, you can see flower spikes forming. Not sure if this is a flower spike though. But yeah, we have so far 2 flower spikes for sure forming. And this is the mulberry. Let's look at the little buds. And you can see there's a lot more buds now, and also the buds are getting bigger and also turning more yellow and green. And over here we have the green onion. As you can see, the flower spikes are getting longer. This rosemary looks pretty much the same. And here we have the raspberry. Those little new growth from the bottom is coming out nicely. And the little buds on the older canes are sprouting now. Especially this cane over here, you can see this sprout is getting a lot bigger. The blueberry is doing pretty much the same thing. Most of the buds have opened. These are going to be the blueberry flowers. You can see the structure of the flowers forming already. And no growth from the ginger yet. On the other side, we have the bulb plants. Here are the summer snowflakes. You can see the flowers have opened. They look very beautiful. One of my personal favorite flowers. And here I'm going to give you a close-up of these flowers. And here we have the Persian pearl tulip. Most of the flowers have opened now. Here's a closer look at the flowers. And this is the glory of the snow. No flowers yet. Here we have the peony. Looks like it's growing nicely. Lots of leaf growth. Hopefully it's going to spread out more in this bigger pot. And this is the grape hyacinth latifolium. All of the flowers have opened now. Really like these colors too. Again, here's a closer look at the flowers. And here's the other variety of grape hyacinth. You can see the flowers are a bit different color than the latifolium variety, and there's a lot of flowers in this pot. And here we have the crocus. All the flowers are gone now. The lavender is actually growing now. You can see a lot of new growths all over the stems. And this is the other rosemary. The plant is actively growing too. You can see lots of new leaves forming at the tip of each of the stems. And here's the daffodil. Doesn't look like there's any new flower forming anymore. This is the calla lily, pretty much all dead. All the sprouts have rotted. Same as dahlia, the sprouts are all gone. But here you can see at the base of the plants there's actually some new growth forming. Hopefully these new growth will stay. In the backyard we have a lot of new growth too. Let's look at this tree here first. You can see the sprouts have opened up and here's some flowers forming. Still not sure what type of plants this is though. Now let's take a look at the hydrangea. You can see all the buds have opened and the leaves are growing nicely. It's looking very green. And in some of the sprouts you can see flowers forming. Here's the shooting star variety of hydrangea. The buds have opened as well and the leaves are also growing rapidly. This sprout right here is a bit infested by aphids. You can see some bugs over there. And here is the sprout with the flower that we saw last week. Over here we have the lily of the valley. All the sprouts are getting a lot taller than last week. They're growing faster and faster every week. And here's a sprout. You can see some flower structures forming. I'll show you some more sprouts of the lily of the valley at different locations. The winter jewels are still flowering, as you can see. And here are the flowers for display. This is the hyacinth. You can see all of the flowers have opened. This is the striped squill. A lot more flowers than last week. I'm sure it's still going to send out more flowers in the following weeks. Now for indoor plants, these are the orchids that I just watered. Here's the phalaenopsis. Doesn't look like it's sending out any new growth. That little sprout still looks the same. And here are the roots. Looks also pretty much the same. And here's another phalaenopsis that was gifted by a friend. You can see it's flowering nicely. Lots of roots in the pot. Here is the mini oncidium. Mostly I can see a lot of new leaf growth. Here's the other mini oncidium, also doing the same thing. And here we have the lady slipper orchid. Right here on the side you can see a new plant forming. Here's the tiny one that broke off. That little sprout is actually sending out some new leaves. And here's another pot of lady slipper orchid. On the side of the plants there's also some new plants forming. And here we have the odontocidium. The plant is actively growing, especially the root system. Here's another odontocidium. It's also actively growing. A lot of root growth in this area. Here we have the mini dendrobium. There's more growth in this other dendrobium. You can see here's a tiny new growth forming. Here's more plants that I just watered that start with the string of pearls. You can see a lot of new growth. Here's the ponytail palm, some coloration in this new growth. The copper stonecrop is slowly changing color too. You can see the leaves are getting a bit darker. The pineapple is still actively growing. You can see more leaves forming from the center of the plant. The pitcher plant is dying. All the leaves are turning brown and there's no root growth at all. The maiden hair fern looks quite healthy. The new leaves over here are expanding very nicely. And if we look at the base of the plants, you can see a lot of new fronds forming. The prairie plant is sending out a lot of new leaves. These from the older growths are also darker colored. Here are the new growths. You can see the leaves are all a lot more pigmented. Hoya plant is also actively growing. At the base of each plant, you can see the new growth forming. There's also a lot of new growth forming on the vines. Here are the succulents. This is the zebra succulent plant. This is the cylindrical snake plant. And here's the frizzle sizzle. It's not sprouting yet, but you can definitely see that the bulb is turning greener and greener. And this is the snake plant. You can see some new growth from the center. It could be flower, but I don't think it looks like flower. And this is the zebra succulent plants. Most of the baby plants on the sides are dead, but there's a few alive. This is the finger succulent. The leaves are getting a lot more wrinkly. Some part of the plants you can see new leaves forming. The elephant bush is still sending out a lot of new leaves. Some leaves of the jade plants are also getting a bit wrinkly. Beside that, the new growth are looking quite happy. Here is the ficus tree. Those brighter green new leaves from last week have now darkened. The snake plant is doing quite well. Let me show you those new flower spikes. On this flower spike, you can clearly see flowers forming. The dragon tree plant is looking a lot happier. You can see all the new leaves are a lot wider. Here's the Easter cactus. A lot of new leaves forming around the plant too. And then the petal plants looks pretty much the same. Let me introduce you to a new plant. This is the fiddle leaf fig. Look at how big the leaves are. And here's the prairie plants that I propagated. The sprouts have opened. The leaves are very nicely pigmented. Here's another snake plant. One side of the plant is sort of turning yellow though. The philodendron is actively growing. There's a lot of new growth from the base of the plant. Here's the pothos. It's also growing, but not as much as the philodendron. The potted saffron fern isn't doing too well. The new growths are sort of drying up. Here's the birdnest fern. The new leaf is still growing. Just watered this succulent that was gifted. And remember those spider plants and arrowhead plants that I potted in soil? I actually transferred them to water culture now. The arrowhead plant isn't doing quite well. As you can see, there's no root growth at all. And this one is going to break up from the top. But if you look closely at one of the nodes, there's actually a super tiny new growth. On the other hand, the spider plant is doing very well. A lot of new roots forming. Same story over here. The arrowhead plant isn't rooting at all. Another plant that isn't rooting is this wandering Jew. It's probably going to die.